welcome to another week of Zoom at 8. My name is Julianne Peterson, and I welcome you to tonight's great time that we get to spend talking to each other and learning. And, you know, when there's a lot of opportunities out there to spend your Tuesday nights, I know you guys have committed so much to Zoom at 8. We've been here for 18 months, and some of you have been with me that entire time. So I thank you for that. We are always looking for new folks. We're kind of like a wolf pack where we, you know, have a new blood. We want to get to know you. So we have had such great success here. We've closed 2 deals, you know, putting deals together and helping them close. So hopefully if you have a deal, so I'm with Julie with Old Capital, and we are a broker in the multifamily space. So we are putting deals together. If you're looking for a sponsor, you're looking for an attorney, an insurance broker, you're looking for limited partners, you're looking for, you know, brokers in terms of your real estate brokers, we're here to help you. We help put your team together. So what does that mean? That means if you have an opportunity, you're looking at a deal, I'm looking for to help you out. Okay. So, you know, I'm hoping that you pick up the phone or you send me an email, because that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help build you, and I'm help to build my business. So hopefully we can do that together. Today, we are excited to have Aimee Morgan with us tonight. She runs the regional multifamily operations for JLL Valuation and Advisory. She provides clients like me, like you, with white glove service for concierge level experience and manages production for the region. Her team performs valuation, market study, and consultation assignments for a wide range of multifamily assets and lending institutions. She has appraised multifamily assets for nearly 10 years and has deep industry knowledge and expertise. She has completed and overseen thousands of multifamily assignments in her tenure in the evaluation industry. Prior to joining JLL, she ran regional multifamily business development and was the multifamily practice lead for North Texas at CBRE. So tonight, this is going to be a great treat to hear. Now, I think of, you know, your lender as your biggest partner, and we're going to be bringing 75, 80% of the deal. So we do come with some of I don't know, I would say level of respect when we talk about lenders. But when we talk about appraisers, it's like the Wizard of Oz. She is the one. These are the kind of people that make the deal work for many of us. So I am so excited to have Aimee join us tonight. And she's got so much information that she wants to share with you. What I find really helpful is if you go up to the right, it says view. If you could change that to speaker view. And for some reason, Alfredo always shows up. Hello, Alfredo. You're always what shows up on my screen. And then Aimee, you'll be able to see Aimee as I give her the 100 questions tonight. Aimee, good evening. How are you tonight?
I'm great. How are you? And I would just like to say that I'm also 22 plus the 2. No.
Do you do the flips though?
I can flip my hair over my shoulder.
That's awesome. That is so great. Listen, can you give us a little bit of background? I kind of went through a high level, but I'm really interested to know a little bit of background about you. What do you do for JLL? How did you become an appraiser? What is the necessary hours for education? And how many appraisals have you completed over the years?
Yeah, those are great questions. And actually, I think when you read out my bio, it's a little bit dated. I have about 12 years of experience in this industry. And before that, I did a brief stint in the HVAC world, largely because of where the economy was, but my goal was always to be in commercial real estate. I have a degree in commercial real estate from Baylor University, which is a tiny private little university in the heart of Texas. You guys know the show Fixer Upper. That's based in Waco, Texas. So that's my alma mater. To answer your question about background and experience that's required to be an appraiser, there are lots of hoops that you have to jump through to become a licensed real estate appraiser. And yes, I am licensed. All appraisers are licensed to some extent. And those licenses are administered by various states and they've got various requirements. However, there are some national standards that all appraisers have to comply with in order to be licensed appraisers in the US. And those are a minimum of 300 hours of coursework that has to be completed within an 18 to 30 month period of time. Over 2,500 hours of real world experience are also required. We have to pass some rigorous tests. And we also go through a work file audit in which a panel of seasoned appraisers will go into some randomly audited work files of yours through the licensure process and read your reports and make sure that they're up to par and that they look good and that you're following all the rules and that you know what you're doing and you're not a dummy. So that's the process, and it's not an easy one. It takes most appraisers anywhere from 2 to 4 years just to get licensed. So it's a lengthy process to become a licensed real estate appraiser. And that's on the commercial side. Okay. So it's different between residential and commercial. And did I catch all of that?
Yeah. So how many appraisals have you completed over your tenure?
Oh my goodness, if I had a count, but it's in the tens of thousands.
Wow. Okay. And is it only been in Texas, or where other markets have you done appraisals?
Yeah, I personally have completed probably well over 5,000 assignments just in the state of Texas. And I also have experience in Louisiana, Arkansas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida, North Carolina. And that's just me personally. I also manage a team that completes assignments all over the country. So there's probably not many states that I haven't had some kind of experience in some capacity over my career, except for maybe North and South Dakota.
Wow. So you're overseeing all of the appraisals in each of those markets. And so you're very knowledgeable of what's happening in those particular areas. So we're going to be very interested to know what you're seeing, both in COVID and, with the trends that people are going into these tertiary markets. Do you only focus on apartments, or do you do other commercial type products, appraisals rather?
Yeah, that's a great question. My team and my expertise is 100% in multifamily. My entire career background is multifamily, and I'm a mile deep in that space. However, I frequently manage commercial assignments for my clients. If they have a retail strip center or a hotel or something else that they're working on, I'm perfectly capable of guiding that assignment to a successful completion. So if you ever need a contact for other commercial appraisals, I can serve as that contact for you. But I would not try to write the appraisal because I'm the multifamily gal, I'm the apartment gal. I'd make sure that the property type expert for that property type is who works on your appraisal. That's something we believe strongly in.
So I'm curious, with COVID, we haven't been able to, in the early days of COVID, we couldn't go into a lot of these transactions. So can you share with us at what point did you guys start to enter and do some walkthrough inspections? Where are we at today versus where we were back in March?
Yeah, for the most part today, we're back to full inspections. The very good news about the appraisal process is we rarely enter occupied units for the appraisal process. It's a little bit different than the level of due diligence you might want to do as a buyer, where you would want to walk into every single unit before you close on a deal. But from a lender due diligence perspective, we're largely able to get most of that done by touring vacant units. And so for that reason, we're pretty much back to going on site to just about every single deal that we're appraising, which is a good thing. It's good for us to walk the property, to feel the property, to see the property in real time and in person. There are things that get a little bit lost in translation through a screen or a picture. And so we're glad to be back out on property. I would say that probably started up for us again over the summer months as the weather warmed and case rates declined a little bit. However, we are being very respectful of everyone's wishes. And if we have an owner that doesn't want us coming out to the property, we're always willing to work with them. If a lender feels strongly about any particular level of inspection, we want to work with them too. So it's really about making everybody who's involved in the deal comfortable with our level of due diligence and doing our best to get the deal done for you guys.
Amazing. So if you're talking about only looking at the particular units that are empty, how do you get a sense of really what they look like? Because, you know, there's different types of units, there's different types of quality of their rehabs. How do you get a good sense of that?
Yeah, when we walk the property, we really ask to see both any levels of upgrades that have been done. So if we can see a representative unit of say an unrenovated unit, a mildly renovated unit, and a fully renovated unit, we'd like to see each. If we can't get that with vacants, we either try to get pictures of occupied units so that we get an idea of what the finishes are like. And we're always reviewing floor plans of every single floor plan type at any given property. So that way we can at least see the functionality and layout of different floor plans, even if we can't walk every single unit at the deal. So we are doing some things in addition to walking units to make sure that we're getting a really full look at the property, especially if we're talking about a property that's really highly occupied and doesn't have a lot of vacant units for us to walk. That's where we start to try to get creative. We will walk occupied units, but again, we want the lender, the owner, and the tenant to all feel comfortable with us walking their unit before we're open to doing that.
Interesting. So I'm curious, and I know a lot of our listeners are curious, how do you value these apartments? You know, we're underwriting them, you know, as a, when I say we, investors are evaluating them a certain way. Me as a lender is looking at them a certain way, and you as an appraiser are looking at them a certain way. How do you value them? Are you looking at the market, the income, the sale? What exactly is the most important that you're evaluating?
Yeah, so there are three approaches to value that are part of the typical appraisal methodology that we would utilize on any given asset that we would appraise. And those three approaches are the cost approach, which is land plus the cost to build those improvements new minus depreciation. There's the sales comparison approach, which means look at comparable sales and adjust those comparable sales appropriately to figure out what the value of the property is. And then there's the income approach, which is for apartments, that methodology is, you know, what is the first year of pro forma income look like at the property, and then direct capitalize that into a value estimate. The approach to value that we always focus the most heavily on is that income approach, because that's what you guys as investors are focused on. That's what the lenders are focused on from an underwriting standpoint. And frankly, our job is to just be a mirror of what you guys are doing. And so if you guys are focused on income and what kind of yield a property has on that income, then that's what we're focused on too. So we focus very heavily on that income approach to value, with a secondary focus on, you know, once we've yielded a value estimate via the income approach, are there sales out there that support that and lend it some additional credibility?
Julie, can we ask questions along the way?
Let's get through this, and then if you want to post the questions in the chat box, and we'll go through those. I think that would be the most efficient. We've got a lot, and if we can't get through all of this, I would really like Aimee to come back so that we can show how she evaluates them from her underwriting standpoint. So thank you, Chris, for asking that. Let's talk about, what does an appraisal cost? We're looking at $400, I think, on a single family. So tell us about what that would look like from a commercial multifamily.
Sure, it's a little bit different for commercial. If you're used to doing single family deals, yes, you're used to that $400 price point for an appraisal, but that appraisal that you're getting is typically a maybe 10 to 15 page form appraisal. Our appraisals on apartment properties average anywhere from 100 to 150 pages in length. So they're very lengthy analyses, and they typically cost anywhere from, depending on the size of the deal, the scope of the deal, and the scope of our analysis, anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 to $15,000. But I would say your average fee for a typical Class B, C deal agency scope of work is anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000.
Okay, so I know that in single family, because a lot of our investors come from single family and are just getting into multifamily. In the years past, we haven't been able to communicate, let's say, with an appraiser. The broker is kind of, here's some comps. It's been hands off. If there's a situation where we have a client who is wanting a property, and we're seeing this all day long right now, where they're paying over to get the deal, right? Is there a way that we could find out, can I offer this amount of money? Will the property appraise without doing an appraisal? How would we get some kind of feedback?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a much more open line of communication on the commercial side than there is on the single family residential side. After 2008 and 2009, regulations were changed on the single family side, which make that process a double blind process, which means that the appraiser doesn't know who's hiring them and the bank doesn't know who they're hiring. But that's not true on the commercial side. It's a zero blind process for the most part, except for a few banks that like to be extra cautious. But typically in the agency world and the Fannie Freddie world, you know who your appraiser is going to be and who your lender is going to hire, and we know who's hiring us. And that's a great thing, because it means that, one, you're able to vet your appraiser and make sure that you're getting a high quality appraiser that knows what they're doing and is really highly specialized in their space and knows the property type, understands agency, understands apartment lending, and knows what you need to see in that appraisal report. And then also, the great thing about that is, as Julie kind of references, that you can call up an appraiser anytime and ask for help. So it would be common practice, if Julie is shopping financing for you, for her to give me a call and say, hey, Aimee, I'm shopping this deal. I'd like you to give it a look and just make sure that there's comps that support where we're, the purchase price that we're looking at. Could you give my pro forma a look and make sure that nothing's sticking out and there are no expense comps that just, totally, negate what we're looking at? Are we going to have any issues? And the huge benefit to that is that your expectations can be really well set early in the process. So that way you've got a really smooth closing ahead of you. Before you guys even app the deal with the lender, I've looked at it, Julie's looked at it, no one's concerned about it. And other than kicking up something crazy through the due diligence process, we're probably not going to run into any major issues.
That is, I want to point that out to everybody. Not all lenders are created equal. And I will tell you that there are a lot of brokers like myself that are in the same space as me that will not do that extra step that we're talking about. So again, talking about what Old Capital separates themselves, this is another opportunity to better get you the right financing to give you the right pricing to pay and win that deal. So really good information. So where do you get the data from? We talked last week to a property manager, and she had a list of places that they get their data. And we know data is what drives decisions, right? So where do you guys get your data from?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have this really cool proprietary system at JLL that we actually just built. It's only been up and running for about a year now. And what we do is we have a great search engine where we can search all of the major commercial real estate data sources in one place. It's really cool. It's only for use by us appraisers, but we get our data funneled into that system from Reese, Axiometrics, CoStar, Yardi, Apartments.com, Apartment Listing Network, and a handful of other little tiny data sources that might be local or regional. And those are really kind of the major commercial real estate data sources. It's really cool to have them all funneled into one place where we can search all at once for the best possible comps.
Amazing. I mean, you really valuable information that making these choices, you have to have great data. So amenities. How do we make more money? How do we squeeze more money out of these and for rents? So what are you seeing? What amenities are creating opportunities, creating income sources? Can you talk to us a lot, like what is the most amount of value that you're seeing?
Yeah, and that's shifted a little bit since COVID. Clubhouses were a really big deal pre-COVID, and now people aren't spending a lot of time in the clubhouse. They'd rather an outdoor recreational area or a bigger dog park where they can get outside a little bit and run around with the dogs and socialize in a more socially distanced area. So dog parks are really big right now. Those are really big pre-COVID, actually. Just something about, I don't know, an amenity for your dog. It's like, I don't know, my dogs are my weakness, so I get it. But dog parks are huge. And of course, in this post-COVID environment, package centers are huge. Right. And I'm hearing a lot about extra package capacity. A lot of tenants have run into big frustrations at their current apartments because there are so many packages coming in because everyone's ordering everything online through Amazon because it's COVID. Nobody wants to go out and shop. That these package centers and the leasing offices are just getting overflowed with packages. And so the packages are getting left on the sidewalk and willy-nilly. So having an oversized, high capacity package storage system is a huge selling point to tenants right now because they're not having to worry about, are my packages going to get stolen all the time or be left on the sidewalk or left in a parking garage where they're just going to disappear and walk away. So that's a biggie. While the clubhouses are not as popular, business centers have been a bit more popular since everyone's starting to work from home. So having, say, like a print center or copy center, where if you work from home, you can go print, on a high volume printer if you needed to print out a big report or scan something in if you needed a scanner. If you need a fax, not that anybody faxes anymore, but any of those kind of like centralized business amenities are really big right now. And then, of course, a large kind of sprawling pool area because everyone wants to get outside and try to socialize a little bit. So pool, of course, is a really nice amenity, especially if you're in the Sun Belt states where it's nice and warm most of the year. And that pool really gets heavy usage. I have seen some really creative outdoor work areas with like picnic benches and outdoor tables in a really nice, weather covered area where people can socially distance and work outdoors. There's lots of really cool plugs and things where people can plug in and work and be socially distanced, but also kind of get some nice outdoor exposure, get a little break from their work from home and they're cooped up in their apartment kind of space. So anything that gets people out and socially distanced is really a big amenity right now.
Very, very, very good information there. I think that we're going to see some, more people working out of their homes. So those 3-unit three-unit apartments are going to be, maybe they'll be using that one for home office. Do you see a trend in how people are using these older buildings and adding another bedroom? What do you see there?
Yes, I am seeing, I've seen some outdoor patios being converted into like mini offices. So in the past, I've seen some of those outdoor patios turned into, say, sunrooms or things like that. That was kind of big in the 90s, was sunrooms. Now they're being more fully enclosed, and I've seen some built-in desks put into them. So that way, if you're moving into a unit and you're thinking, I'm going to work from home, but gosh, I don't have a bunch of office furniture, you got this like built-in study that would have been the patio. So those are pretty cool. But yeah, we are starting to see a trend towards larger floor plans and larger units. I haven't seen it as heavy as maybe we thought we would, largely just because I think tenants are focused on, I don't want to overspend on my rent. Things are a little bit economically uncertain. So don't want to overdo it on the apartment, but certainly the 2-bedroom floor plans are becoming more dominant than they were. Where someone might want a really nice Class A 1-bedroom, they might be going for a B+ 2-bedroom because they want that space.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. All right. Taxes are a big deal, especially in Texas. I'm curious, how do you determine property taxes for a new buyer? And this comes up from the lender standpoint, because people will say, no, I called and it's only going to be this amount. And we say, that's great, but it's the appraiser that is going to tell us exactly how much it's going to be underwritten at. What happens there is if it's over, we can't get you as many loan dollars if we're estimating it to be higher. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I think it's a sticking point for a lot of, especially in Texas, that there's, there's just some frustration, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a huge sticking point. I would say 9 times out of 10, when I see deals that have to have proceeds cut, it's over taxes. And so that's always a bummer. And we want to do everything we can to help you guys understand on the get-go what those look like. So that way everyone's expectations are set on, what's right loan amount and how do we maximize those loan dollars given how we need to look at taxes. And Fannie and Freddie have their own ideas of what taxes need to look like on a stabilized basis. So when you're getting your appraisal done, they'll tell you, you need to defer to the appraiser, but we also have to work with the agency in terms of what they're expecting to see too. So it's a twofold process there. But the important thing to know about taxes, and this is the sticking point, is that taxes are not about what the actual tax amount is going to be for next year. What's important from an underwriting and from an appraisal standpoint is, what are the taxes going to be, assuming that the property sells, whether it's selling or not, because an appraisal inherently assumes a transaction. We're answering the question in that appraisal of, if you put a for sale sign in the front yard of this apartment complex, what does it sell for? And so that question assumes a sale. So whether it's a refi or a transaction, we assume that there's a sale taking place. So that's really important to know for taxes. And then also, are we properly capturing the long-term reassessment risk of this property in our pro forma tax amount? The reason for that is that we're only taking 1 year of cash flow and capitalizing that 1 year of cash flow into a value, which means that 1 year has to assume the risk of your entire hold period of the asset. If we were doing what we call a discounted cash flow, what we would do is we would consider what would the actual taxes be in every year, and then we would discount those cash flows back to a net present value. But because we have to consider all the risk in that one cash flow, we have to consider that in the taxes. But it can also be considered in the cap rate. So what you want is you want an appraiser who's going to consider the right balance of risk between tax expense and cap rate, given the state, given the climate of the agencies for that state and lenders for that state, and given what market expectations are for that state. So I may have lost you guys in a lot of appraisal mumbo jumbo there.
That was very deep, and I think there's a lot of value. Should we go over that one more time? Do I see any heads that are saying yes, we want to go over that? Yep, I see hands. Yeah. So go ahead, if you would just unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
But that was really good stuff.
Let me give you an example. So in Texas, every property is appraised or reassessed every year by the assessors. So it doesn't matter whether there's a sale or not. Every property gets reassessed every year. But Texas is a non-disclosure state, so the assessors don't know what a property is going to be traded for unless that purchase price gets out. And unfortunately, they get out more than we would like them to. So assessments in the state of Texas tend to be anywhere from 60 to 90% of purchase prices in the year after a purchase. So if we have a property that's currently assessed at, say, 40% of the purchase price, we're way below the typical range of 60 to 90%. So the appraiser's got to decide what are the appropriate pro forma taxes for this deal based on where it's currently assessed, based on what we think would happen after the sale, and appropriately considering the risk of that guess or that projection in our cap rate. So if we were to say, let's use a 50% assessment ratio on this deal. It's below the typical range of 60 to 90, but it's still 10% above where it's currently assessed. It's kind of a down the middle approach, but there's risk in that estimate. And so we would want to consider that risk in our cap rate, versus if we said, okay, it's currently assessed at 40, let's mark it up to 90%, the top of the reasonable range, then we'd have a whole lot less risk in that estimate. And so we would use a lower cap rate. So what you want to do is you want to find an appraiser who's really good at finding that right middle of the road approach of putting just enough risk in the taxes and then let the rest of it fall to the cap rate, because that maximizes your loan proceeds.
Oh my goodness. I think we're going to have you come back. So, because that was, that was some amazing stuff. And I'm hoping that you will be able to stay with us during the networking, because I'm sure there's some people that will want to ask you some questions. So let's table that, and let's talk about, can people walk the property with you, the new buyers? Are they able to walk it with you hand in hand, arm in arm, while you're doing the inspection?
Gladly, and we would welcome that. We really love to hear the buyer's input on any particular deal. You guys have a plan when you buy a property. You have an investment plan, and you have something that you're trying to accomplish. And especially with a value add deal, you have a vision for what you're going to do with the property. And it's so important to us for us to hear that plan and that vision, because it plays into the value of the asset. We want to know what you as a buyer, as a market participant, are planning to do with that property, because you are the pool of market participants that we are trying to, that we are trying to replicate. Dexter, I'm so sorry. This is what happens on Zoom calls.
We just ignore them. It's okay. No problem. So do you want to have any paperwork before you go into the inspection from a broker so all of the paperwork, what can you tell everybody, that budget, the vision, when do you guys want that?
Yeah, we like that as early as possible. So
Okay.
the quicker you can get us a rent roll, operating statements, your operating budget for the property, the better. We like to see all those things before we show up at the property. And we'll often send, I'm so sorry, Dexter.
It's okay.
There's a little girl on a pink bike, so we're really in danger over here, guys. So the property manager is often asked to fill out a form for us before we arrive as well, and that has a bunch of questions about things like how many stories and how many buildings, and does it slope a particular way, and is anything in the flood zone, and it's just a bunch of physical facts that you would get about a property. A lot of those things are usually in an OM. And so those would be the types of things we would want to know before we show up.
Gotcha. All right. I know a lot of people want to know because there's so much stuff that people put in their apartments, and walking through thousands and thousands, I'm sure you've seen some wacky things. So can you share with us something that's super wacky and maybe even a horror story real quickly?
Yes. So this was from like a month or two ago. This is a first, and I see a lot of things. But I was walking through an apartment property that I will keep as anonymous as possible, inspecting it, and they said something about like something with cinder blocks in the toilets. And I said, I'm sorry, what? Cinder blocks in toilets? And every single toilet at this property was situated on top of a cinder block. I can't explain why this was done. I can't explain why you would mount a toilet to a cinder block. I've never seen anything like that in my entire career. It was very weird and strange, and I have no idea why they did that. So unfortunately, part of that appraisal was considering the cost to go back and remount every toilet in an appropriate manner, not mounted on a cinder block. So,
wow.
Very strange.
Crazy.
The other crazy thing I've seen is a property where the dryer vents were all venting directly into the wall cavities. So basically the whole thing was just a giant lint ball ready to blow up at any moment. So something to look for as you're walking properties. Do those dryer vents actually vent to the outside? That is something important.
Simply put, doesn't seem like it would be that much of a oversight, but my goodness. All right. I think we could go real quickly, maybe not, cap rates, because cap rates are huge. Is there a quick overview? Because I think what I'd like to do is have you come back, and if you can do maybe high level cap rate, because we've got such compression right now. How do you figure it? Seriously, it seems very random.
It's a great question. I'm going to try not to get too nitty gritty with you guys on cap rates, but we look at really three major things when we're concluding to an appropriate cap rate on a deal. And really, there's four sources, but we don't hang our hat very heavily on the fourth source. So I'll tell you the four sources, and then which of those three we look very heavily at. So the four sources are, we look at what are the cap rates indicated by other sales in the area of similar assets. We look at what would be the built-up cap rate if we considered typical equity yields and typical equity expectations, and typical loan terms and loan yields in a particular location. And we blend those all together to get a cap rate through an analysis called band of investment. So it's a mathematical formula that takes into consideration both mortgage and equity yields and spits out an appropriate cap rate. We could dig into that for an entire hour if we wanted to. Yeah. Third, we consider what local brokers are telling us is the appropriate cap rate for a deal. And we talked to lots of local market participants, buyers, sellers, brokers, to figure out were they seeing on cap rates on a particular deal. And then fourth, and least importantly, we consider market surveys by sources like CoStar, PwC, some other sources do cap rate surveys. CBRE does a cap rate survey. We look at those, but what we really want to look at is those first three that I spoke about, and make sure that all of those are supporting our cap rate conclusion. But really the best thing for you guys to understand about cap rates is that cap rates have to do with the balance of risk to a deal and expected yield from a deal. You know, you guys are putting equity dollars into this deal and you want to make a certain percentage on those equity dollars, and that matters. And then we weigh that up against how many equity dollars are out there chasing deals and wanting to buy these deals. So those are the two pressures that push up against each other on cap rate, and we try to find the balance between those. So you guys want high yield on your equity, but then there's a lot of equity dollars chasing deals, so that puts low pressure on the cap rate. And where do those two meet in the middle? That's the right cap rate for any given property.
And seems so random, but yet you do have a formula. You know, I always scratch my head and say, how do we find this? And again, if this is an opportunity where you're trying to dig in on the cap rate, sometimes I'll say, go talk to the broker on this, not a mortgage broker, but rather the real estate broker, to say, what are you seeing? But Aimee has been really comfortable to say, hey, make sure that you check in with Julie at Old Capital and we can get some cap rate understanding of your particular transaction that you're looking at. So I'd want to make that available to you. We don't want to overuse getting a hold of Aimee, because she's been so good to give us some information. But if you're really considering something where you're just unsure, and maybe by knowing this a little bit more accurate information, I would ask that you come and let's kind of figure that out with Aimee. I know that we could go on, Aimee, for many, many more hours, because this topic, it affects so many of us, right? I mean, every one of us in this room has to know how an appraiser thinks. So I'm going to open this up real quickly. Is there anybody that has a question? I didn't see too many questions in the chat box. I know there was one thing that said, how long does an appraisal take?
An appraisal takes from the day that you order it to the day you receive your draft report into the lender, anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks. 2 weeks would be a very standard turnaround time for an appraisal. In what we call the busy season, which is like November, December, that can push to 3, sometimes even 4 weeks, but rarely would it take longer than 4 weeks to turn around an appraisal. And that would be really, frankly, a very rare exception. So 2 weeks is very standard.
Okay. Rick has a question. I knew you were next, Rick. You always have a question, so I want to get it answered. He's looking for deep value add properties. How does he get an after renovation value assessment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So often if you are getting an agency loan, you will only get an as-is valuation. And this may be something you've experienced before. The reason for that is that most of the agency lending programs are not bridge programs. They're not renovation loans, and they're not loaning on an as stabilized or post renovated value estimate. They just want to know what's it worth today when you're buying it, or what's it worth today when you're doing a refi. So the best thing you could do if you want that analysis is, at the time that you're getting your appraisal done, contact the appraiser directly and order one for yourself. If it's already being done for the lender, some of the work is already been completed. And so that is the best time to order your own appraisal, because you've already got an appraiser that's been out there to see the property, not paying for another inspection, not paying for another comp search, you're not paying for another rent comp search. You're simply paying for an additional kind of add-on analysis, if you will, to the appraisal that you've already ordered. So reach out to the appraiser and order one for yourself. We can often do that in a very limited scope of work, so that you're not paying for a big $4,000 appraisal that would typically be that lender scope of work. We can do what's called a restricted use analysis, where we basically just give you a number. We just give you a direct capitalization approach. It's like 1 or 2 charts, and that doesn't cost nearly as much as the full shebang that the lender would typically order. So we've got options for you if you would like evaluation done for your property.
Awesome. Is there anybody else that has a question? Chris?
Hey,
Chris Tao.
Aimee, great information. Quick question. So you mentioned about appraisal amount and evaluation. My understanding is always the tax office who determines that. So how does lender influences the tax amount at the end where the tax office does it?
Yeah, so the tax office is who's going to decide, the assessors in any given state and the tax policies of that state and that particular jurisdiction are who decide what your taxes are going to be next year or for any particular year. What we as appraisers and what the lenders are trying to do is understand not just what's going to happen to taxes next year, but what's going to happen with taxes over the period of time in which you own the asset and over the period of time in which the loan is in place. So what they're doing is they're trying to understand the tax climate of any particular environment and mitigate that risk. Because what could happen in, say, states where taxes stay the same for 3 to 4 year periods, and then reassessments happen every 4 years and taxes go up on year 4, is a deal could underwrite really well with the current taxes, and then in 4 years your taxes go way up and now you can't pay your mortgage. And so that's what they're trying to mitigate when they're considering the risk over the hold period of the asset or over the life of the loan in those taxes, because they don't want you, the borrower, or them, the lender, to end up in the situation where you can't pay your mortgage because the taxes went up. Does that help a little bit to understand why we look at it a little bit differently than the what are your actual taxes going to be next year kind of approach?
Okay. The follow-up question is, you mentioned it could be anywhere from 60% to 90%. I haven't heard anyone can do 60%. How is that achievable?
Depends on the area too. We're not
Totally,
talking about Texas.
Yeah. That was purely an example. That's just Texas. And that totally depends on area of Texas, vintage of the deal. That's a really broad range. That depends on a lot of factors. So don't hang your hat too heavily on that particular example. That was just an example to help you guys understand how we might look at a deal. If you have questions about taxes and you're getting deep into a deal, I would highly recommend that you reach out to Julie. Julie can find you resources to understand how taxes are going to be underwritten on any given deal. And I'm one of those resources. So on any particular deal, I'm happy to give it a look, or one of my team can give it a look and tell you, how taxes are going to shake out from an appraisal standpoint.
Awesome. All right, James, I saw your hand up. Do you still have a question?
Yes, I do. I typed it into the box, but I can.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, not at all. Aimee, thank you for tonight. I had a question. Have you ever done an appraisal without seeing the occupied units and then had to totally revise it after maybe getting into the units and seeing the condition of some of these units?
Yes. And every lender understands this is part of the kind of assumptions and limiting conditions that we use in the appraisal process, because we don't lay eyes on every single aspect of the deal, and because we're also not For example, we're not mechanical experts. When we look at a piece of HVAC equipment, we don't know whether it's functional or not. We just see that it's there. We have limitations on our analysis. And if we discover new information and new facts that are outside of what we assume to be the case or assume to be true, then that can change our value conclusions. Absolutely. So when you get an appraisal report, be sure you look at those assumptions and limiting conditions and any specific assumptions that the appraiser might have made in their analysis. Those should be displayed very prominently in the appraisal report. And those kind of help inform you as to what might alter an opinion of value. Is that helpful?
Excellent. Yeah, very, very good information. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up our speaker series with Aimee. Aimee, just amazing information, and I really do believe we should have you back so you can take us through an underwriting session. Last week we talked to Kimra, who is going to come back and do an underwriting session as a property manager. So Aimee's going to come back as as an appraiser. So I think that there's some real good value to share with you so that you get a really good sense of how these people who are part of the transaction are doing their job and supporting the transaction itself. So Aimee, thank you again so much. Appreciate it.